Hi, everyone. It's Janice from the Divorcing Religion podcast. I'm excited to tell you that my book is now for sale. It's called Divorcing Religion, a memoir and survival handbook. And I'll make sure you have a link in the notes for that. And also, I want to encourage you to like, subscribe, and become a member of my YouTube channel. Take care. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Divorcing Religion podcast. I'm your host, Janice Selby. I'm a registered professional counselor and a religious trauma recovery coach. Today's episode is part of my series called Strong Women in Secular Spaces. I'm really pleased today to be speaking with Carol Murchison. She's an attorney who leads a practice group litigating sexual misconduct in religious, faith-based, and spiritual communities at McAllister Oliverius. He's an experienced investigator who has conducted dozens of workplace investigations, including those involving sensitive allegations made against top-level executives. In addition, Carol has developed and taught courses on investigative techniques to human resource professionals at many Fortune 500 companies. Her current work shines a light on the failures of many spiritual centers and retreats and the abuse of power by cult leaders. I've had the pleasure of interviewing Carol previously on the Divorcing Religion podcast, and she was also a popular speaker at the Conference on Religious Trauma in 2023. Carol, it's so nice to see you again.
Oh, it's lovely to see you again also, Janice. So wonderful to be here. Thank you.
You've been really busy. It sounds like you show no signs of slowing down. Unfortunately, that means there's still a lot of shenanigans and even abuse going on in spiritual and religious settings, because that's really what your work seems to be focused on, is bringing justice when leaders abuse the people who are following them. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. And you are right that shows no signs of slowing down. If anything, I think we are looking at a situation, if not around the world, certainly in the United States, where there's a certain permission that is, kind of embedded in the, at least in the political scene, that abuse is not taken. It's taken lightly. Let's just say it's not considered for the harmful, traumatic, illegal, I would say, kind of action that it is.
Oh, especially when it's wrapped up in spiritual or religious trimmings, because, where that really is the last sacred cow, is the idea of religion and spirituality. And then something that is meant to be comforting to people, helpful for people, give them a purpose or whatever else. And sometimes it's also part of someone's culture. Some of the religions are very much embedded in the culture. And so then predation is even easier when people are in those situations, if they're told that the leader is not to be questioned, if they're demanded to forgive. I tell my clients forgiveness is the F word. What we really need is acceptance of the reality, just that this has happened, only because then that sets us on a space of being able to really critically determine, was it acceptable? Do I still want this person in my life? Do I want to consider litigation? Whereas if you're demanded to forgive and you just think, oh, well, it's okay, then that robs us of our power. And you are in the business of helping people get their power back.
We try. Here's the thing. I was laughing, Janice, when you were saying forgiveness, because years ago I was in, I think it was Lithuania, and I went to an exhibit, and the name of the exhibit was "Forgiveness is Not a Possibility." And I was so taken with that kind of thing. I think we make a lot of incorrect assumptions when we feel that people have to forgive. I am not in favor. I don't know how to say. How do you say you're not in favor of forgiveness? I think that we need to rethink that whole, kind of like, we have to forgive as being a given. I think that we can forgive, but I think that it only can come after there's been accountability.
Yes.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what we are trying to do in litigation, is that we are trying to hold people accountable under the law for acts that are illegal under the law, and to hold not just the perpetrator accountable, but also the organizations that enable them, because very rarely do we see cases in which it's just that the perpetrator has sexually assaulted one person.
Mm-hmm.
It is that there are a series of assaults. It's embedded in the organization, and the organization is aware of it and enables it.
Yes, yes. It's everyone else who knows about it and tries to keep it under wraps. And it seems, I am sure, not a week goes by where I don't read yet another pastor somewhere in the United States who has been found out for having, inappropriate or really abusive, unacceptable relationships with someone in their flock. Usually a girl or a woman, but there are, other situations as well. And
There
the
certainly
pastors
are.
just get up, and if they're found out, they might apologize at the front of the pulpit. But even that seems rare. But an apology is something, but it's certainly not as much as action. We know
That's right.
somebody really is sorry about what they did when they completely accept responsibility and change their actions.
Yes, absolutely. I think of apologies as a word salad. And so you see, they're just, we put all of these words into a bowl and we toss it up and see how it comes out, and it's not really meaningful. And, in litigation, oftentimes we make what we think of as non-economic demands. So we might say our clients want to see change, right? They not only want to have people held accountable, they don't want it to happen to other people as well. And so they want to see change. And increasingly, as we are doing non-economic demands, which is somewhat difficult. We can talk about that if it's of interest, but it's difficult to do that sometimes in the civil justice system in the United States, at least, because the justice system is about reparations. It's about money. It's about you compensating for the harm that you've done. And so the non-economic demands are sometimes very difficult, sometimes not. But I find increasingly that people are not interested in an apology because they've seen the apology. The apology is written by somebody else, like the PR firm, and the apology has no meaning. The person is endorsing it because they have to. And so it is actually meaningless. Other things can be more meaningful. An acknowledgement that harm was done. Changes in policy, changes in procedure, a statement on the website that that harm was done and the organization is not is aware of it and takes responsibility for it. Those are the things that have more meaning than an apology, I think.
Oh, yes. And one of the reasons that I wanted to do this special series, Strong Women in Secular Spaces, is because with the recent election in the United States and a felon now assuming the highest office in the land in what is essentially the most powerful country in the world. And he is an abuser of women and a predator in some ways. And it feels like women, I mean, women have always been targets to some degree or another because we are not physically as powerful as a
Mhm.
lot of men are. But it seems like Americans voting to reinstate that person as their president, it's like women don't matter. They already
Mhm.
took a very important right away, the right of reproductive sovereignty away. A woman she doesn't even have bodily autonomy in the United States anymore because her medical records, which are supposed to be, sacred. Oh, there's that word, but you know what I mean. Only between her
Yes.
and her doctor. Now, oh no, anybody can go after and demand and say, I think she had an abortion and I want the doctor to have to be held accountable. So this thing that previously was very private for everybody across the board, women no longer have that right. And so I have tremendous concern for women in the United States right now. And I want to be interviewing women like you, women who are strong and doing the work that you do, trying to empower other women. And in your case, helping to get them some of the reparations that they deserve because they have
Mhm.
been abused.
And I'm completely without words related to the election. I do feel that, as has been widely reported in the press, that when you look at cabinet picks, people who are going to be assuming positions of power,
Mm.
we see that. Um, even if even when we're only talking about allegations of sexual misconduct, things that have not been proven, but what we see is that women are not believed. Their
Right.
allegations are held to be that somehow they are lying, that women are gold diggers or after money. We've heard these ridiculous things for many years. And I guess that we are all stunned that in some way we are going backwards. We are going back, as you said, with bodily autonomy and all of
Mhm.
those things. I actually feel that we are also going backwards in relationship to religion, which I
Mhm.
which I regret in many ways, because I think that we live in a time where community is extremely important and also rare. We do not have the kinds of communities, connections that we might have had even a decade ago, and certainly not 2 or 3 decades ago. And so, with the pandemic and all of this, I feel that religions have an opportunity to provide community for people. But we, by a kind of blanket, um, uh, 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 going backwards to any kind of religious activity, or everyone who has a restrictive religious belief,
Mhm.
that we're also destroying religion. Do you know what I
Mhm.
mean? It's like
Mhm.
when you look at the Catholic Church. In my case, when I look at Buddhism, which is where many of my cases are from, or I look at yoga,
Yeah.
many of my cases are from. And I think this is not good. Not all religion is bad, but when are these religious groups going to actually begin to police themselves so that those of us who are, let's face it, Janice, gray haired and still out there fighting, when are they going to do that work instead of putting it on us?
Mhm.
I want for the Dalai Lama and the religious leaders in Buddhism to step up and
Mhm.
address the issues of sexual assault in Buddhism.
Wow.
I want people in the yoga Hindu religions to do the same. I want religions in the United States that are operating as cults. I want legislators to give us more legal tools to go after these people. These are organizations that are not, that are using their power to harm people, and we don't have enough legal tools to be able to deal with it. And in my mind, well, somebody once said of me that I was trying to destroy Buddhism in the West. And my response to that is I'm actually trying to save Dharma around the world. That it's not the religious beliefs at heart that are a problem. It is when they are weaponized against people. And ultimately, that works against the religion. Ultimately, as it has against Catholicism. Years and years of misconduct and enabling of misconduct have made people leave the religion, look upon it with skepticism. This is all going to happen with a lot of different religions that are out there weaponizing their teachings in a way that they are able to use it against people. So I think it's bad for religion. I'm not a religious person, so I'm not worried about any particular religion. But I know many people who are. And we live in a time when having that sense of community, as you said, that sense of purpose, all of those things, they're positive things that we need, that people should be able to believe in. But instead, we have a corruption of these ideas.
Right. And I do think part of it can come from some of the supernaturalism, I got my air quotes going, ideas that people have through their religions. And so if they think of God as a man and they're thinking of men then as superior to women. So behind me, I have the 10 humanist commitments. I love those. I would rather see those in every school than the 10 commandments, that's for sure. Nobody has the right to inflict their beliefs on another person and insist that they believe the same way that they do. It can be something personal that a person feels or believes, or maybe, like you say, they are part of a religious community. And so for some people that can be healthy. But when we have predators in the midst, and predators seek easy prey, and they are often able to rise to the top in situations where they can then control and manipulate and coerce their followers. And so coercive control is something I think that more people need to learn about. And that might be the way that we're able to make change as far as laws and governing goes. So would you talk a little bit about coercive control?
I would love to, because I do think that is the marker of what I consider to be cults. Or I don't even want to say that they're cults. I think that it's hard to get people to agree on a definition of a cult, right? But I would say that coercive control is one of the major indicators in religious communities or spiritual communities that it is cult-like.
Yeah.
And that's really the thing for me. There are charismatic leaders, but there are all of these markers of coercion from people have to believe the same thing. If you do not believe, you are thrown out of the community. If you deviate in any way, if you have to believe, this is what I see most often, if you have to believe that the leader knows everything, that the leader has the key to the mysteries of the universe, and not just the universe, but to you. If you have to surrender your agency through these coercive techniques, many of which are very small as they build on one another, until people do not know then that they are being coerced into these positions. So the coercive control, I think, is one of the biggest markers of the organizations that we are litigating against, and where our clients have come out of and realized that they were not consenting to what happened to them, that they were coerced. And that's the reason that I actually love the U.S. Federal Human Trafficking Act, because it is based on fraud or coercion. And embedded in it is the idea that you cannot consent when there has been either fraud or coercive control.
Wow. Yeah. And this coercive control, it seems insidious. You mentioned it builds on itself in small increments. And so a person might not even recognize that it's happening. And then suddenly they are in a situation that they didn't want, but they didn't ask for, that they don't even want to be there, but yet they feel like they've been told somewhere along the line, you have to do this to save your soul, or whatever it is that's being told to them. Wow.
Yes. And I think that there is probably some kind of brain science. I love brain science, because I think we're learning things that we kind of know, but we don't. It's like going to court and say, well, I kind of know that this is coercion. But I think that, brain science is going to help us understand what happens in coercion. And what happens is that one of the markers of cults is that you never know what's behind the screen, right? It isn't like people say, okay, here's our belief. We believe this. Would you like to join us? People don't go out and say, oh, here's what we believe. We believe that the guru or the swami knows everything. And if they want to sexually assault you and you don't think that that's a good idea, it's because you're unenlightened. They don't tell you that in the beginning, Janice. They tell you peace and love and light. And that sounds like a good idea. Who doesn't think that's a good idea?
And you can help change the world if you join this group.
Yes, absolutely. And look, we have so many people. Think about the wonderful individuals that join these organizations. They're not stupid. They're not, they are not less than we are. I have so many people who say to me, well, yeah, that's too bad, but that would never happen to me. And that's absolutely not true.
I hear that all the time on social media. It drives me up the wall.
Yes, right? Because the reality is that, as you said, these are organizations that are promising you, not only you, a better life, but a better world through peace and love and all of this business. It's a very appealing, enticing invitation. But what you find out, you don't find out in the beginning. You find out slowly over time through coercion. Everyone in some organizations has to dress the same, or we have to shave our heads. So we lose our individuality, and I am positive in another decade, maybe less, some brain scientists will be able to tell us exactly what's happening in our brains, and when with these coercive techniques, so that when we go to court, we can try to persuade juries and judges, which is what we're doing, that this is what happens. Because if you haven't been in a cult or been exposed to cults like you and I have, and you're sitting up there, you're a judge, you don't believe it. Just like those people that are aggravating you on social media, you don't believe it because you have no education on it. So I love what you are doing. I love what journalists are doing. I just spoke to a guy from a major journalist outlet. And I love what people are doing because they are helping us educate judges and future jurors. They're helping us educate. I have lost hope that we can educate these cult organizations because they simply are not able to, take anything in other than their own dogma.
Yeah, they're entrenched.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just impossible to get them out of it. But I hope for judges and juries, I hope for people who happen to land on a podcast like yours who are in a cult. I have people who tell me, for example, my sister and I were allowed to leave the ashram or, the Buddhist retreat center. And we went to visit some relatives. And while they were there, they watched the documentary on Keith Raniere.
Oh, yeah.
And on the second episode, they looked at each other and they said, we're in a cult. So even people who are are able to see that because of the work that media does, because of the work that psychologists do, that academics do in research. I don't know if you know Anne Gleig and Amy Langenberg. They're academics in the United States. They're writing a book on sexual misconduct in Buddhism.
Wow.
And it's the first academic research on this topic.
Mm-hmm.
So important what people are doing, all of these little bits and pieces of the puzzles that put it together that hopefully make it easier for us to get accountability, which is what we said in the beginning, right? That's what we want. We want accountability for people who have been harmed.
And I mean, when I think of the horrible Project 2025 blueprint that the Republican government is planning somehow on instituting, and I fear that we will see rights further and further eroded, and then we are especially really going to need lawyers like you, people who understand the law and the Constitution and are willing to say, no, that does not fly. That's not how it works. Someone like me who doesn't really know much about the law or legal things, I do feel quite nervous and anxious. But I'm in Canada. My gosh, I'm not even in the United States, but I know you guys sneeze and we catch cold. So whatever happens over there to some degree happens
exactly.
Here. So I want to know about things like coercive control. I feel like that's part of, I look at the MAGA group that has arisen in the United States. People were indoctrinated. People have been sucked in and farther in. So yeah, when people say, "Oh, I would never get sucked in or tricked like that," I saw through religion when I was in grade 3. I'm like, well, good for you, but a lot of us were indoctrinated at the end of a wooden spoon or a belt or something like that. When those things happen, it makes it very, very hard to break free from the indoctrination that's taken place. And if we grew up in an authoritarian home, sometimes it feels like we can be more susceptible to coercion.
Yes,
and that's where we need the brain science.
Yes, exactly. We need to understand exactly what's happening. We already struggle in the United States under the First Amendment. So the First Amendment is the freedom to, kind of worship the religion of your choice. But I know that a lot of people want to push that in a way that would make it more and more difficult to bring the kinds of cases that we bring. So, for example, when we look at some of the, the cases that we're big in the United States, we see Keith Raniere, for example. He was not a religion, so the First Amendment was not implicated in any way. He was really a multi-level marketing scheme, and he never kind of packaged himself as a religion. But a lot of the organizations that we sue do. And they will try to use the First Amendment as a defense by saying to the judge what is clear under the law, which is courts cannot entangle themselves in religious ideas and practices. So
Wow.
that means that the element of fraud that we use under the Trafficking Act, we can't use against religions, because to engage, to say that something is fraudulent requires that the court look into it, right, and determine whether it's a fraud. Well, it would be like saying, for example, in some of the organizations that we sue, enlightenment is held out to people. Well, a U.S. court cannot determine whether enlightenment is a fraud, because they would have to do, and then how would they determine it? You know,
Mhm.
and so it would be like saying, let's sue, this church over here because they are saying that Jesus walked on water. Well, we're just not going to get into that because they
Mhm.
cannot determine the truth of it.
Right.
And so
Right.
they stay away from it altogether. So we
Mhm.
have to stay away from certain of these, um, things like fraud. Coercion, however,
Mhm.
is something that you can point to and say, here are the coercive control elements that were in place. And you can look at them and you can see. You're told who to marry. You're
Mm.
told who you can be friends with. You're told what to wear, what to believe, what to eat. All of these things are coercive control elements. Have you seen Dr. Steve Hassan's book, The Cult of Trump?
Oh, yes. Mhm. Mhm.
So
Yeah.
Stephen has a lot of done a lot of work on coercion and coercive
Yeah.
control. That's quite
Mhm.
helpful to all of us, to individuals in identifying this, but
Right. His bite
also,
model. His
yes,
bite model.
we
Yeah.
we use it all the time. So for your listeners and viewers, they can just go online and look up the BITE model and
Mhm.
Dr. Hassan, Hassan. And we give it to clients sometimes and say, identify, just check mark the things that you identify from this list that you were subjected to. It
Mm.
helps them understand how much coercion is at play.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Steve has done some great work, and Yanya Lalich, Dr. Lalich as
Yes,
well. She
yes,
shows up frequently in TV series, say on Netflix or other series, where people are exploring various cults that they were
yes,
involved in. And both Yanya and Steve were involved in cults. Hers was a
yes,
political, his was the Moonies. So these are people who have quite an understanding. She went on to become a sociologist, and Stephen went more into psychology. But I'm
right.
so grateful for the work that they have done.
Absolutely. And, I'm grateful for therapists. I know that you do counseling in this area.
Mhm.
We cannot, we cannot do litigation with, the kind of strong, courageous women who stand up and say, I was abused in a cult, unless they're in therapy. It's so important that people be in therapy to begin to process all of
Mhm.
this. So it just takes, the old cliche, it takes a village, but it really does take therapists and researchers and brain scientists and psychologists and lawyers and, support groups.
Mhm.
The best cases that I have are ones in which ex cult members form a support group around the the plaintiffs.
Yes, that's so powerful, and I got to give a shout out right here then, because I do offer an online free religious trauma support group. And I have people from every background, people who left Scientology, people who left Orthodox
Yes,
Judaism, ex-evangelicals, former Catholics. So their backgrounds are different, but they understand the pain and loss that goes along with having been indoctrinated at some point, and then breaking free from the indoctrination, losing their community. They lose their
Yes.
supportive community that they had before. They lose their identity. Their worldview has, dissolved around them. And now they're trying to pick up the pieces and figure out, how do I move forward? How can I build a healthy life for myself that doesn't involve that group that is unhealthy or that has a problem with
Yeah.
predators?
So that's a great shout out, Janice, because that is key. Therapy, a lot of people can't afford therapy. If you've been in a cult for a lot of years, you haven't come out, with enough money or anything really. And so the support groups, I feel, are really a tremendous help in just helping people understand they are not alone.
Mm-hmm.
That they are not inferior people that were stupid,
Mm-hmm.
and somehow fell under the influence. We need to start pointing the finger at the people. They are trusting people, right?
Mm-hmm.
That go into cults. As you said, they are looking for a better life, a better world. Those are positive things. Those are
Mm-hmm.
things that we should all be wanting, and that they were taken advantage of. We need to start pointing the fingers at these organizations that are doing it, that are betraying the trust of
Right.
these really wonderful and peace-loving people that we want. I mean, these are people who want better for all of us and for our world. And so I
Yes.
love it that you have the support group for folks, because it's tremendously important.
Oh, yes. And a lot of the folks that I work with, recovering from religious trauma, they leave their group without really much education. I do work with a
Yes.
lot of people sometimes who were, I got my air quotes, homeschooled, but
Yes.
maybe whoever was doing the schooling didn't know what they were doing. So they don't have more
Mm-mm.
than really a grade 4 or 5 education. Some of them never had a bank account. They don't know how to drive. They've never even been to a dentist or doctor. Some of them, they get
Yes.
glasses for the first time. I mean, these are people that are having to overcome exceptional odds
Yes.
because of the groups that they were involved in and the control that was exerted over them.
Yes, absolutely. You mentioned the word grief before. And I think that is really important, because I do see in the people that we are working with that there's an enormous amount of grief over what you lose
Yeah.
when you walk away from a
Mhm.
cult.
Mhm.
Um, there is an unbelievable amount of courage that is required to do that, to actually force yourself to see something that you were taught not to see, to
Mhm.
actually leave everything that you're talking about. How frightening it is for people to have learn how to do all of these things that the rest of us are learning to do as teenagers, and then into our early 20s, and doing the adulting, that we learn how to do in those decades, that you have to do all at once. It's an enormous process of grieving a
Mhm.
loss of education, a loss of practical skills, a loss of reality. Really, it's absolutely amazing to me that and it is mostly women, although not entirely, but of course women are in this position, as you mentioned earlier, of having our allegations denied, of being silenced,
Mhm.
of getting the message early and often that our bodies do not matter. And
Wow.
so the kind of courage that it takes to bring yourself to a point when you will say, I want accountability. It's tremendous courage, in my view.
Oh, and sometimes they're leaving behind children
And family
they're
members.
denied access. Yes,
Yes.
family members, spouses, parents, to the incredible courage that it takes, and then go on living to choose to keep. I'm going to keep trying to move forward, even though my heart has been shattered and I'm terrified and I feel like I don't have all the support that I need. But this is the life that I have. I'm going to make the most of
Yeah.
it. I
Yeah.
just am in awe of people who make
I am.
these
I am
decisions.
too. And you know what? I have to say that the litigation process is not survivor friendly. I mean, litigation is not friendly really to
Yeah.
anybody,
Yeah.
right? And so, I mean, I just see that it it is so difficult a process to be involved in, and at the same time, I also see from many of our clients that they are making it a healing process for themselves because they have been silenced, because they have
Mhm.
not been able to stand up for something that they felt was wrong, even if what was wrong was way in the back of their heads, not even at the conscious level, but unconscious there, all of the time. And it comes up and they're willing to act on it. I think that it can be a healing process for people, that they are taking back their power. And
Yeah.
we as lawyers, we are really just speaking because that's what we do. Apparently, we love to talk. I know. I remember that when I was much younger, I thought, I think I would like to be a doctor. And then I thought, oh, God, no. I don't understand math, science, and I hate blood. So, but I could be a lawyer because I can talk. That was in
Yes.
my mind the only thing that lawyers needed to do. But
Mhm.
in certain ways, we are mouthpieces for people who haven't yet been able to speak into power,
Mhm.
into that power of holding people accountable. And I think for many people, that is a healing journey.
Yeah. Totally, totally agree. As survivors, um, we make commitment to ourselves. So we
Yes.
were kind of stuck in very difficult situations, and now we're going to keep acting with integrity so that
Hmm.
our what we say is in alignment with what we do and what we think. And it's like a huge learning curve to
Yeah.
come to the point of realization, oh, wow, I am worth speaking up for. I am
Yes.
allowed to say what I think and what I feel and what I want. It's an amazing process that people go through when they leave these groups. Are you in a position that you could talk about any cases that you have worked on recently or things that are going on that we should be aware of?
Well, of course, I can't name any cases, but I can say that a lot of our cases, well, very few cases ever go to trial. Let's just start there.
Oh,
Interestingly
okay.
enough, and I'm not just talking about our cases. I'm talking about cases in general. Trial is a very difficult process. It's extraordinarily long. It takes
Hmm.
years to get to trial, right? So the course of litigation is really more focused on settling, and sometimes that's through mediation. And so we have done a number of mediations, and we're involved in a number of mediations now. And they are. In some ways, proving difficult because cults, as we said before, don't they live in a bubble of their own making. They've developed their own truth,
Hmm.
which is not subject to the forces of the external world in many
Right.
respects. And so, helping them to see the truth of the litigation system, which is that it will be extraordinarily destructive for them to go to trial. Let's say
Mhm.
we have a very good case, we have a number of very good cases where the other side is they don't understand that. In their mind, look at where they're coming from. They're coming from the fact that the Swami or the Guru is infallible. So how could what they are not even there with what happened that is a sexual assault. They are there with this was a blessing for the person that it happened to. So why would I need to repair this?
Wow.
That's where people are coming from.
Yeah.
It's not a
That's shocking.
surprise, right?
It's true. Yeah, exactly.
That's what they've told themselves in the same kind of mental coercion and conditioning that's been dished out to everyone else. So we sometimes find it difficult to mediate. Sometimes we have to go more than once, like we have to get a little further along the road of really educating the other side, the defendants, to the risks involved in going to trial. So what we're finding is I just did a presentation, Janice, that I titled "The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly." A kind of can civil litigation bring accountability to survivors? And I would say there are some ugly parts of this. And one of them is that it takes forever. It's just impossible to understand how long these things can take.
Well, I just read a manuscript by someone who survived a cult that was in the form of a religious school, and their class action suit took over a dozen years. It was like 14 years or 16 years, and it was finally decided in the favor of the victims. So yay, that's a fantastic thing. But 16 years it dragged on. There were some of the students in the meantime who had died, who didn't even make it through all the way that. And so I think it's important for people to recognize what you're saying. When you say it can take a long time, we're not talking about a year and 2 years. It can take a longer time.
And it's not even, so you said 16 years. I know we're litigating a case in Canada, and our co-counsel, who are Canadian lawyers, just got a settlement money from a church that had been in bankruptcy. It was 20 years, Janice. And so you have to have, at the same time, a long view.
Yeah.
And you also have to say, I have to be willing to settle in order to get on with my life.
Yes.
Because I just heard another lawyer say this, and one of my clients was saying something, and almost all of our clients, and I myself, are subject to the idea that we would like, there's vengeance. Like I am personally, like angry at these people who do this. And I could very easily move into vengeance. And certainly for people who have had it happen to them, ruin their lives in the way that you've mentioned, where you come out without a bank account, without knowing how to do anything, you could be for vengeance. I get that. And this lawyer said, unfortunately, vengeance is not something we can deliver in the civil justice system. We really only can deliver money. And it's not because people want money, because they're gold diggers or everything else that people have to say about it. It's because it costs money to bring yourself back to a position of wholeness after you've been taken advantage of. And of course, many of these cults are using people for forced labor. And so they've not ever been, they've given their lives, many people, to these organizations, and these organizations need to pay people. So I am all for money. I understand when people want revenge or vengeance, or are not willing to forgive. I get all of that. I really, really do, because that is exactly the way I would be if I was in that situation. I'm not in that situation, and I have many days where I fall into that. But it is worth remembering that the civil justice system does not give us vengeance or revenge. It really is about settling cases and assigning a number of dollars that, equals some level of repair. You never, ever will get the money that is going to pay for your harm.
Right, right. And I see that in Canada with reparations to our First Nations, Indigenous,
Yes.
Métis, and Inuit people who were so horrifyingly abused by different Christian churches. So it's not
Yes.
just the Catholic Church. It was, there
No.
were other churches involved as well. And here we are all these years later, and our government, just in the past, I don't know how many years it's been, have started making financial reparations, even though it feels like too little, too late, when an
Yes.
entire culture has virtually
Yes.
been decimated, and very purposely, very strategically. It's just incredible. And I certainly look at the United States and think, wow, their reparations will definitely be. I hope they will be forthcoming there for different groups, but I don't know if that will ever happen. Yeah. It's hard. It's hard work.
It is hard work, but it is gratifying work to stand with people who are so courageous as our clients are. And for others like you, Janice, in all of these different areas that are working on this, it's hard work for all of us, but there's a tremendous amount of satisfaction.
Yes, I feel the same way. And today you've mentioned different, there have been Buddhist groups, yoga groups, and even some churches that you're aware of or have participated in legal recourse. Is it? Do you see? Are there more and more people coming from churches in the United States bringing these forward, or does it remain very heavily saturated? Your work with Buddhist and yoga groups.
It remains that's where we began our work, but we see more and more coming out of different kinds of churches. And I credit that to some of the documentaries and the podcasts and things that are raising awareness on this. I think that people are more aware, so that hopefully people are not going into them in the beginning. They're like, wait a minute, this sounds like something I'm sorry.
No problem.
That it sounds like something that I shouldn't get involved in, or that they learn of it later after they've been out and they say, wow, this is what it was. This is what happened to me.
Right. High demand groups, coercive groups. And I think you're right. It is the podcasts and the series that are coming out, the different shows and books too. And my book is coming out shortly too in the next couple of weeks. I'm very excited about that.
Yeah. All of that. I forgot people who are writing books about it. Whatever way that we have of raising awareness and educating people, it's all positive from my perspective.
Oh, yeah. I'd sure love to see schools also incorporating classes around coercive control and these different techniques, like you mentioned, the bite model, for schools to be aware of these things and also to be teaching their students. But, we would expect zealous religionists to rail against that because they want to maintain the grip that they have. So I think America's in for a bumpy ride the next 4 years. I'm glad that you are there and people like you working hard on behalf of people who are seeking justice.
I'm happy to be here, Janice.
It's been such a pleasure chatting. Wow.
I love it. I love it. I'm so happy to see you again and to talk with you again. It's been great.
How can people find you? Like, what if a person has just kind of come to the conclusion that, oh yeah, I think I was abused in that situation by my religious leader or guru. How can they reach out to you?
Well, I can give you my email address.
I'll put that in the show notes if you like, or.
Yep.
Okay.
I think that's the best way. We talk to everyone who comes to us. We talk to everyone. And
Wow.
so anyone who has a question, who feels like they've been in this kind of group, whether they have a legal claim or not, we try to direct them to resources. If they have a claim, we see whether we're able to take it. If we are not, we try to recommend other lawyers. We try to direct people to the resources that they need. So anyone who has any question, I welcome them to email me.
Oh boy, that attitude is just so beautiful and so validating. You might be the first person that someone speaks to. I imagine sometimes
Yes.
people are emotional, recalling these things, and I just know that you would be there holding space for them and encouraging them how they can, in places where they can find resources also to help them on their healing journey.
Yes.
So glad to know you, Carol. I appreciate
Thank you, Janice.
what you're doing. Wow. Okay. Well, I want to thank everybody for tuning in today, and I will have the links in the show notes, and we'll see you again soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.